Hello, welcome back. Today I am going to talk about the deities that I work with. There are three main deities. I will make a separate video for each one, describing how I interact with them and what I do to honor them and how I work with them, and my relationships with them. Two of them I would say really found me, and then one of them was more of my choosing. First and foremost, before I even got into witchcraft, I didn't really have like a god or goddess that I spoke to very often. I would speak to the universe. I would send out all of my prayers, everything I asked for. I would just sit out and talk to the stars, and I have a, if you want to call it the primordial soup that everything is created from, I hold that in the highest regard. Without that, nothing would be in being. It's an ever expanding and ever creating, ever destroying, beautiful machine, and I feel like it needs to be honored above all else. A lot of people call it God or the all, stuff like that, but that is who or what I give most of my so-called worship to. As for the deities in my life, I don't really worship them. I have them mainly around like friends. They are my friends. I treat them like my friends. They have a permanent spot in my house, just like my friends do. I drink with them, I speak with them, I have discussions with them, I go to them for help sometimes, but I really call upon my own power to get things done. They're more guides that I use to just help, just aid me whenever I really think that I might need it. So I have two goddesses and one god. The very first goddess that I encountered was Hecate, and she came to me at the beginning of my work, and it was in a dream. I was like in a city somewhere, and I was lost, and I was standing in a crossroads in this city, and I would look around, and I had absolutely no idea where I was or where I was headed, and so I found a restaurant. Weird, I know, but there was a restaurant, and I walked into this restaurant. I forget what it was called, but it seemed to have like um, a Mexican theme. It was definitely a more ethnical restaurant than just like your typical American diner. Um, when I walked into this restaurant, it was staffed by all women who wore black. Every one of them had long black hair and wore long black dresses. And I stepped into this restaurant, and the ladies there, I was greeted by 3 ladies, all of varying ages, and they asked me if they could help me, and I really didn't know what to say at all. I just kind of looked around and, you know, still didn't really know where I was going or where I was at. And so I turned around and walked back out. And once again, I faced this intersection, this little crossroads area, and I kind of really took a good look at my surroundings, and all I saw were busy city dwellings. And so I turned back around and I went back into the restaurant and I asked for help. And I don't really remember much after about what I asked for help, except for that I was handed like a menu, and on the menu, it's the title is like Hecate's Crossings or something like that. It's her name was definitely on the menu, and at that point I woke up. I didn't really know too much about what that meant, and so I went to my witchy mama, and she told me that it sounded like I had an encounter with Hecate, and she didn't really work with her at all. She was more of a Celtic worker. You know, she didn't really venture far out of the Celtic pantheon. So after that dream, I didn't really pick up Hecate. I was still very new at everything, and I didn't even know if I wanted to get involved with a deity at all. I liked the sound of it, and you know, I thought it was something cool, like a interesting possibility, but I was new and I was quite unsure about everything, so I kind of just let it be, and I just didn't really think too much of it, and I just continued with my classes and whatnot. Then there was one of our classes where we learned how to make protection charms. During this class, we would always, well, at the beginning of every class, we would always create sacred space, and we would call in a deity that would work well with what our topic was for the day. And during this particular class, my witchy mama called upon the Morgan, because that's who she worked with. That was her main goddess, and the really lady of the shop. I didn't really think too much of that either, because I didn't know much about the Morgan then. so we made our protection charms, and we went home that day, and I did a little bit of research about the Morgan, because at the end of every class, depending on which deity we would call in, I would like to look them up and learn a little bit about them, you know. And when I learned stuff about the Morgan, I was a little concerned, considering I had no idea who I was working with. And here we are calling upon this goddess that seemed to be at the time a warlike goddess, one that is not to be trifled with, you know. And I was a little upset, but I trusted my witchy mama that she knew what she was doing, and I just kind of left it at that. I like to, you know, delve into things and then see what happens and learn from what the results are. Nothing bad happened after that. Nothing bad at all. And so that kind of eased my mind a little bit. Then there was a Samhain ritual that we were going to do, and the day of the ritual, I was kind of having a bad day. You know, I had a little kid, and we had done trick-or-treating, and I had like gotten into some arguments with some people that I was close to, and I was kind of disappointed at the outcome, and I really just lost my oomph for wanting to venture out and go to this ritual. But as I was sitting, relaxing and browsing some news on the internet, this voice came to me that was not my own, and it said to me that it was the Morgan, and that she had heard my cries, and she had seen how much I had been going through, and she said that she could help me, but I needed to go to this ritual. She said that something very special was going to happen to me at this ritual, and that it would help to bring a lot of peace to my mind and help me along my path. So I took a deep breath, and I got my shit together, and I got dressed, and I went to this ritual. So at this ritual, we lit candles for in honor of someone that had passed that we really loved, and I lit a candle for my grandmother who had passed a few years before, and you know, nobody announced who they lit candles for. It was a private thing, you know. You just walked up to this altar area, and you lit a candle, and you placed it there, and you may have, you know, uttered a few words or whatnot. I did that, and then she had, my witchy mama, she had several of her psychics and spirit workers sit around a table with a beautiful wooden Ouija board, and they proceeded to start using it. Someone was writing down names and what was being spelled out, and then someone else was using a pendulum above the board to assist, and then there was a psychic who was speaking, like just, you know, calling out whatever they were receiving. When they really got going, because this sucker was moving, there were 8 spirits that seemed to want to speak to the people at the ritual, and the ritual was very large. It was about 30, 35 people there. It was pretty big. So they said that there were 8 spirits, and then they started asking the board for names, and names were being spelled out, and it just kind of went along until they got to the 7th name. Well, okay, let me backtrack a little bit. Every time they would get like a solid name, they would ask anyone in the group, in the ritual group, whether they knew that person. And for the most part, everyone knew exactly who was being brought through the board. By the time they got to the 7th name, my grandmother's name popped up. And it was really kind of funny, because my grandmother's name was Mary Jackson, and the name that was getting pulled through was Mary J, and they all thought it was kind of like a joke, but no, it wasn't like I knew a Mary J. So they asked, after they had acquired matches for everyone's names, they asked the spirits, you know, if they would like to relay messages, and they did for the most part, but it seemed like my grandmother wanted to be silent. She didn't really have much to say, and I was really close to my grandmother. Like, she raised me while my mom was off. My mom was a jockey, and so she had to travel across the country a lot to work, and so my grandmother helped raise me whenever my mother was gone for work. We had a very strong bond, and so this ritual had indeed turned into something really special. My witchy mama had a tarot deck that she was pulling cards for all the people who had matched with names, and she called me up, and she started pulling cards for me, and everything that was brought through via her card pulling was very direct and sincere, and there were several things that were said that only, you know, my grandmother would have known in relation to me, and the message that was given to me was it's a pretty private message, so I don't really want to share that, but it meant a lot, a whole lot, and it indeed brought me a lot of peace, and really helped me to set forth on a more solid path of work, where I could really rein in my focus, you know. So after that ritual, the Morgan became a big part of my life. And after we had finished all of my classes, my witchy mama knew that I was creating quite a relationship with the Morgan, and she gave me this beautiful raven pendant that she herself wore for 22 years, and it was her pendant in honor of the Morgan. So now I have it, and I wear it just about every single day. So after that, I realized, man, I've got 2 goddesses on my hands, but I have yet to select a god. So I don't really connect with a whole lot of the gods. But there was one in particular that I really, really, really was growing fond of, and that was Cernunnos. I love the forest, I love deer. I had acquired a deer skull from my mother in a previous trip to New Mexico, and like hunting and archery. I just absolutely love all of that stuff, and it's always just been a big part of my life. And once I started researching him a bit more, I kind of came to like a realization that maybe this person has, this deity in particular, has been around me my whole life. And same with the Morgan, because there was times in New Mexico where, when I was a kid, where I would talk to the ravens, and I would just encounter deer. Like, I mean, I know in my hometown there's deer everywhere, but there's this one particular instance where I was walking to school, and this huge stag, like absolutely gigantic, came across my path, and I mean, I have never seen a stag of this size, and his antlers were so large, so many points. I was awestruck, and it was just standing in the road where I was heading to the bus stop, and we just looked at each other for what seemed like eternity, and then it looked towards the forest, and it just slowly walked into the forest and walked away. There was no fright whatsoever from this beautiful creature. I mean, every other deer that I've encountered just bolts, you know, they don't stick around people very often, they just take off running. So I thought that was a really beautiful, magnificent encounter. And I also really liked a lot of the other aspects of Cernunnos. The Dark Hunter, and the just like the Green Man, you know, those types of things that surround him, and his persona, that just really, really got to me, because I love that. I love the cycles of the earth, and it really struck home about how important that role could be. So I took him on as my god, and that really kind of gave me a good little trio to work with, you know, like the Morgan and Cernunnos, you know, they work well together because they're both Celtic in the Celtic pantheon. And then Hecate, she's just, you know, she's there for like all the stuff that I can't really call on Morgan and Cernunnos for, particularly, just like the odds and ends things that I really like to do. I talk to her and I get her aid for those things. And if I've got other witchy friends who seem to be a little lost, you know, I will ask her to help guide them, like she guided me into discovering who I should be working with. So that is the story of my deities that I work with. I hope you enjoyed it. The next video, I will start off with Hecate, and then I will do the Morgan and Cernunnos, and I hope that you get something from them. Like, that can help you figure out exactly what you need to be doing or who you would also like to work with. So thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.